You'll be all right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Houston Tech Fest this afternoon. Thanks for joining us this Saturday afternoon. Before we get started, I want to make you aware of the Q&A feature. There's a small icon in the upper right hand of your screen. It's a little question mark. And at any time during the session, go ahead and post your questions there, and Harold will answer them throughout the session. So I'm delighted to have you with us here and to introduce Harold Pulcher, who is going to talk to us about C# on the browser and hopefully explain to us what the acronym FTW is. So with that, I will turn it over to Harold.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Thank you very much. Greetings, programs. What you're seeing on my screen right now is PowerPoint Live. If you want to join the session with me, what that will do is that will make it so that you can follow on your own device the web presentation, and any slide that I have already presented, you can go back to and look at again if you would like. Also allows you to translate it into your language of your choice. I talk East Texican, and not everybody speaks East Texican, but so maybe the translation may not be that great, but at least it's going to try. So I'll give you a couple more seconds for people to join up there. Also, that in the upper right hand corner, the short link there will be available throughout the entire slide presentation. So if you decide you don't want to join now and want to join later, you certainly can do that. So I've been asked to give a little introduction to improving. I'm going to go forward with this in about 3, 2, 1, I think. Yes. All right. I'm in the focus in the wrong browser. Oh, there it is. All right. I do work for improving. I'm also a Microsoft MVP. I've been around. Oh, somebody gave me a like and a heart and a love and all that kind of stuff. I wonder who that was. So I don't know. Might have been. My wife is over here is making sure I stay in focus. So improving does a lot of things. Mostly we improve ourselves, we improve others, and we have virtual training courses. We can train you wherever you are, anywhere in the world. Some of the most awesome trainers in the world we have in our disposal, and I know all of them. They're great folks, and I can't wait to hang out with them in person again. We are hiring. No React, no JavaScript, senior Java developers, full stack developer, junior full stack developer. Yeah, which is what I am. I'm a full stack developer, and I'm glad we need more of us. And talking Angular and various other things like that. You can send them to careers@improving.com, and we have like 14 different offices, and we're about to see some of those. That's where we're located, wherever you are in the world. We're not, well, in the United States, North America anyway, we might have a place close to you. And due to the current situation, we're like, for instance, I'm working on a nationwide grant. Other people are working for stuff from that are new iTexico people that join us out of Mexico, nearshore stuff. Fantastic stuff. We have free lunch and learns every Friday, starting at 12 p.m. If you want some more of this, I'm planning on getting signed up at some point to be on one of those Friday lunch and learns. It will be pretty much the same talk, but with maybe some new additions as I've learned new things. So there you go. You want to get in touch with me, and if you want to take a snapshot, I used to when I was presenting live, not that this isn't live, but presenting in person, and if everybody like to take their photos with their cameras, this would be the slide to take. This has my name, my Twitter handle, my email address, my YouTube account, my Twitch handle, and most importantly, the GitHub that holds the talk you're looking at right now. If you want to go and come get ahead of me, I guess you can go download that now if you want to do that, but that's up to you. But it is up there already, well, along with a bunch of other stuff in the Blazor Playground directory. All righty. So it's our agenda. We're going to figure out what Blazor is. We're going to tell you how to get started. We're going to go over some new features in the Blazor WebAssembly. We'll talk about what's next, and depending upon the time constraints we got going on here, I want to show you a couple of fun things that people have done with Blazor that I think, I don't know, are they business-like? Don't know, but They're nostalgia for me, and I like them, and I thought they were fun to show off. So here we go. If we go back to the Dark Ages, and what I mean by Dark Ages, way back to 2017, if you were doing interactive UI on the web, you were probably doing one of these, Angular Reactor View, probably. And what do those all have in common? They're all JavaScript frameworks. Every last one of them completely JavaScript, runs in the browser, right? And then wrong about 2017, this fellow shows up. This would be Webassembly. And what exactly is Webassembly? Webassembly is, hold on, my notes. Yeah, Webassembly is a way for runtime code, byte code, binary code to run in the browser. And if you code to WebAssembly, guess what? It runs just about on every browser there is. And we will go over what those are in just a bit. What is Blazor? In a very quick, short sentence, it's an interactive web UI for .NET. Completely .NET. There's no need for JavaScript. There's no need for other languages, so to speak, but that are scripting languages. Is all a bytecode that gets compiled and runs on top of WebAssembly. So why should you be interested in such a thing? Well, it's C#. It's the bread and butter for lots and lots of people. There's been lots of folks that have done lots of work in C# for a very long time. So you know what's going on, right? At least I think I know you know what's going on. Oh, what is all this? Tell that to go away. The tooling, whether you like Visual Studio or not, when it comes to IDEs, it's got to be the Cadillac for, I'd put that up against anything. However, if you don't like Visual Studio and you like Visual Studio Code, which I believe is the #1 JavaScript development platform these days, or if you're running on the Mac, guess what? All of that works with Blazor, or Blazor works with all that. You got a consistent ecosystem. What I mean by that is it was built for .NET, it runs in .NET, so if you stay in the whole .NET infrastructure and Azure and all those sorts of things, guess what? The stuff should just play together. I know you run into mistakes on a time or two and things that don't want to, you got to go fiddle with some bits because some of this is bleeding edge stuff, but basically it all works together. And as far as stability goes, C#'s been around for a long time. Microsoft introduces a product, it's supported for 10 years. Heck, there's even some still VB6 still running around out there. It's not really supported, but it's still available to use and people to use it, as opposed to like some of the JavaScript frameworks where I'm sure tomorrow 10 more will show up somewhere that I've never heard of before. And you might like them, you might not. And should you get on the board with this or not? I don't know, that's up to you, but you have some stability baked in. All righty. So how does this .NET get in the browser? Did we just slam it in there? Hey, here browser, here's some .NET, boom. No, not exactly. What we do is we start with a browser. Yeah, we have a browser. Everybody has one of those. And we have this thing called WebAssembly. It's in your browser now. Been in your browser for a while. You probably didn't know it, or maybe you did know it. If you did know it, that's fantastic. Then we slide in some .NET that's been compiled and built to run on WebAssembly. And once we do that, we then throw Blazor in the mix. Now, this is all well and good. And at this point, I can run Blazor on .NET and write a bunch of logs to the console, right? How are we getting this to show up to the end user? I don't know. Sometimes I like writing things to the console, but the end person probably doesn't like that so much. This is where we use the WebAssembly's ability to talk back and forth to the DOM. And so that's where the front end comes in, Web UI. All righty. So that's what we call Blazor client side or Blazor WebAssembly, talking to the DOM. There's also a Blazor server. We'll talk about that in a second. Where does Blazor WebAssembly run? Runs Edge, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Android, iOS. It does not run in Microsoft Internet Explorer. I know there's lots of people out there crying right now going, not on Explorer. I can't do this. Oh, please, you don't want to do this, right? It's a good thing. It's a good thing it's not running on that. It's the time we kill some of that Explorer stuff, right? Okay, now let's talk about server side. How does that thing work? We talked about client side. We talked about server side now. Blazor, the .NET stack, everything runs on the server. Every last bit of it. And we'll see why you might want to do that. How do we get to the web page? How do we get to the user talking to the DOM? It's Signal R. There's just enough client information sent across so that you can talk Signal R. And so literally every click, every update, everything that shows up in your browser is coming through Signal R in the DOM. You're like, well, that may be cool, kind of crazy. Yeah, there's some limitations, but there's also some pluses to it. One of the pluses meaning if I've got proprietary code I don't have shared, guess what? I never share it. It never leaves my servers or your servers for them to go out there. So which one of these should you choose? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a second. As far as Blazor server goes, it runs everywhere too. Plus, it will actually run on Microsoft Internet Explorer 11 because it supports Signal R. Now, if you're one of the unfortunate people that cannot upgrade to Edge for whatever reason, I know there's people exist, government agencies, other things that need to get approved. This is a path forward to you if you want to use some of this technology. All right. So let's talk about this. Client side versus server side. This is east side versus west side. If I could throw a gang sign, I probably would, but I don't think that's going to do us a whole lot of good. All right, so let's talk about the client side first. Well, take that back. We'll talk about when it's shipped. Both of these are shipped now. Server side in .NET Core 3, and in May, I believe May 19th was the official date that client side ship for general availability and use. So they're out there. It's not just, this was beta when I started doing this talk, and it's no longer anymore. Client side, really great for offline support and PWAs as progressive web apps. We'll show a little bit of that in the future. Zero latency UI. I'm running inside the browser, so when I click a button or I move a thing, the browser's actually controlling it also. It happens as fast as the browser can do it. And it supports something called static files hosting. Essentially, everything you need is in a DLL or in a package that downloads to the browser. So you don't need a fancy web server. In fact, you can just leave this setting out on a drive somewhere and you click that thing with a web browser and it comes up and it'll work. Pretty cool. So what about server side? Why would I want to use that? Thin client. Like I just mentioned, all the code is in the server, never hits a remote location. So if you're concerned about that level of security, you can be rest assured that none of that leaves your secure facility. The only thing leaving is updates to the DOM, which you're going to have to leave at some point anyway. And you get full runtime support. Everything that you have in .NET, everything that you can do in a .NET stack anywhere, you get to use that. So which one do you choose? Kind of depends. For instance, what would you choose for this device right here? Okay, I've thought about it a bunch. Give you a few seconds to think about it as I talk about it. I could choose either. For instance, what is this device? This device is something in a grocery store or a retail place where you'd walk around and you would scan your items as you go. And then when you get done with it, you go put it in a scanner at end scanner at the end. It rings up. You go, okay, pay for that. Or you could even maybe pay right here through this device and just walk out the store, dropping off your scanner at the door. Okay. I might want to have a full-fledged WebAssembly on this, so I'm always up to date. I have fast response. I have a great UI experience going on there. Though I might want a server side because this device may be very limited in its memory and its resources, but I still have a bunch of stuff it needs to go check and go do. So, and I know that I've got good Wi-Fi coverage. I know I've got low latency everywhere in my device, everywhere in my area. And I know that my server's local, so it's going to be really, really fast. I don't know, which one do you choose? Not quite sure. Depends on your architecture and how you want to do that. So you got choices. Okay, so let's get started. This is all you need to get started. You need to pick your tool of choice. I usually say weapon of choice, but tool is a more appropriate name here, I believe. Visual Studio 2019, Visual Studio Code, or Visual Studio for Mac. Any of them, because we have, and also get the .NET Core 3.1. And since .NET Core runs on Linux, Mac, and PCs, again, choose your weapon that you're going to use on this. For WebAssembly, you want to do one of these things. For a server, you want to do the other one. You see the whole difference there, that Blazor WASM versus the Blazor server. That's just a template that comes along with the .NET Core SDK. So let's see if we can make some stuff happen. All righty. So from here, I'm going to go over here. I've already typed this in so you guys couldn't see me make mistakes. You know, I'm cheating, so I get to do one of these.
That was easy.
Yeah, I get to do one of these all the time. So Blazor WASM, type it in, hit go. And this is difficult. I know it's going to be hard for most people to be able to do that. And that's one of them, right? Step number one. Blazor WASM, CD into the thing that just was there. Bunch of new files that just got created for us. And I see one of these. This is hard. .NET Run. While that's spooling up and running, I am going to open me the project in Visual Studio so we can walk through some code. Didn't remember. Blazor program, talks, Houston. This is up on the repo. I'm going to open that project. While that's coming up, I'm going to jump over here and go to localhost 5000, which it told me to go to right over here. Localhost 5000. This is the Hello World program for Blazor. This is a file new project, just as it goes. And there's a couple things going on here. It gives you a small smattering of things. Hello World gives you a bit of a component, how that works here. There's an about that you get to go to if you want to, you know, but we're not going there today. We just went there. A counter with a button on it that clicks. I know that's exciting. And a way to fetch data as you're going through and do. And as simple as that's all very simple. And I could have done this two ways. I chose the WASM way to do it. The server way to do it looks exactly the same. The end user cannot tell the difference. And the code you're using is exactly the same, whether it's the server or the browser working on this. So let's go through this. Has it come up? It's come up now. Let's go through this and explain some of how Blazor does what it does. So we're going to start right here at the program.cs. Every core based application will have one of these things that fires it up, and it's very simple. We've got a bunch of components that we're going to fire up. One of them's called app, which we'll look at in a second, and add some scope for some client, tell it to go. Nothing fancy there at all, and runs async, and away we go. So let's look at the app. I really like this app thing. I'm going to scroll up just a little bit. I really like this app, .razor, the way they're doing it. You have a router and assembly. You have a context of route data. So if I found, and that's a Blazor thing, if I found some route that you wanted me to talk to, then what I do is I apply the main layout, because I've given it a default layout, and I show the page wherever that is. If I've not found it, this is essentially your 404. I get a layout view. I can give it its own layout if you want, and then what bit of HTML do I want to spit out there? In that case, you can make that a component, and so it just shows up like everything else is a component. Okay, cool. Let's look at that main layout and see how difficult. Well, before we hit the main layout, let's see the imports. How do I get all this junk so I can see into it so it's not laying around? You could literally do this into every file that you want in all your pages. But why? This underscore import says I want to import all of these for all my pages because I know I'm going to be using them everywhere. And this is just an easy way to get that done. And let's look at the main layout, Blazor. This is a bit crazy, right? As in not. We inherit from this layout component base, which does a few things for you. And then we throw some HTML up there. Nothing special, nothing fancy about that. The only weird thing in here, there's the nav menu, which is a component. We'll talk about a component here in just a second. And then you have this body here, much like Angular, React, and I think Vue does this too, but I'm not so familiar with Vue. This is where, when you emit things, I emit something called a body. This is where it's going to stick it in the main layout. So you can have several emitters that emit to different places of your screen if you'd like. And away we go. Okay, let's see how that counter works. We'll come back to the index in a second. Let's see how the counter works. For instance, remember what I said about route data? Does a route exist? Very top of the page, at page, router, put in what you care about. And then you can do different things like this. You can give ID : GUID if you'd like. So now again, I need to have not just a counter, and it's required, and then not just a counter, but a GUID. And if I wanted it to show up both times, I could do one of these things. So if I don't give it a GUID, I hit this page, and if I do give it a GUID, I do hit this page. But now I've got an ID that I can hit off of to see what I'm doing, right? The other thing is, you got a button. And you have an on-click element, attribute. You have an on-click attribute. All that does is call this bit of section down here in the code, and this is a little bit different than I've seen before. But it's essentially C#.NET code. Oh, in the old ASP.NET days, we called this code behind. But I really like the ability to have my markup and the code that's going to act on that markup right next to each other. In this case, it's the same file. It doesn't have to be in the same file. It can be somewhere else in your project if you want it to be. But this is my current preference for doing this, but your preference may change. And that's okay. We can have different preferences. All right. And then let's go into the fetch data. So we get a little bit more here. A little bit more information going on. Again, we got our page, and that's the route for the fetch data. We're going to inject an HTTP client. So this is how the injection works. I'm injecting this thing as just HTTP so that down here in our code behind, for lack of a better term currently, we can use that and go get stuff. And that's the same fetch, same HTTP client that .NET Core has been using forever. I define a record as it comes back and what it looks like. I define a list of those things, and on initializing, when this component gets initialized, the first thing it does is spool up a bunch of those and grab sample data out of a place, which that's okay. We got nothing major going on there. And that allows you to do a couple of things. Like for instance, this @if says, hello, I'm going to do some code, much like just the Razor page. This is just a Razor page anyway. I am going to do some code. And there it is. I'm loaded. If I got null forecast, if I do, and then I emit out this amount of this bit of HTML markup, and complete with for eaches and all that sort of stuff to do things. And that's what gives us our page. And let's see what else. Oh, one more thing with components and talking indexes. This is my index. You've seen the page, right? It's a fancy page. This little bit here is in a component all by itself. This is how components work. That is a component. That's not a markup. That's not Blazor. That's a component. And that component is right over here with a shared prompt. I mean, survey prompt. Sorry, I can't even read my own writing or my own copying, whatever. We have a component listed. We've imported it through the underscore import so everybody gets it. And then I submitted an attribute of how is this Blazor working for you title. And if we go and look at that prompt, that survey prompt, that's what it looks like. Notice you don't have a page directive up there because we don't really want that to be its own page. And we have a bit of a markup going on here. Notice the title there. Notice this bit down here. You mark it as a parameter. It now becomes a attribute. I will tell you a couple of things though, that the get is yours. The get is yours. Can you access the set? Absolutely, you can do that. Should you do that? Probably not. That set is really for the framework to be able to put and set things. So what happens in the WebAssembly is that you've got a DOM in your browser. You have a shadow DOM working around in WebAssembly, and what's going on is Blazor can see the shadow DOM. It can't see the real DOM down here, right? So what they do is they change the shadow DOM, and then through some, I think it's kind of magic, but through some magic, even though it's not really magic, I don't quite understand it yet. They detect the changes, and then they just send the changes down to the real DOM, and that's the way it gets updated. So that's what stuff can be really, really fast because you're just sending down changes. You're not re-rendering the whole. You're not sending down the whole re-render of the page. The page is rendered up in where it's really fast in binary code. But you can set that if you want to. It's just probably a good idea not to unless you really, really know what you're doing, because at that point things could get out of sync and you don't know what you're getting on the page. All right, let's go back over here to our wonderful session here. There you go. Yeah, now this next thing says, let's see it in action. And we just did. I'm ahead of myself. Figure that out.
That was easy.
Yeah, my easy button here. Yes, I do have an easy button. So, right. So let's go on to the next thing here. I'm going to spend the next several minutes talking about all of these things: authorization, code sharing, JavaScript interrupt, debugging, internationalization. I call that localization, but that's, I don't know. Sometimes I have a hard time saying that word, and progressive web apps. I'm going to say all of those things. We're going to talk about all those things pretty quickly and go through and show you them. Right? So, saying that, need to get out of here and go on with it. Go back to, not the Blazor WASM, not that. Yeah, here we go. Let me show you this application here. This application is called Car Checker. I do have the link in the slides for this complete application and how it's working. So the first thing we're talking about is authorization. And you know, you see up here, this is kind of a reference app they've been using to do some work. You'll see here where it says Harold, welcome Harold. It seems to know who I am. But also you see this bit of noise down here that says could not sync. Could not sync. Well, let's see if we can get it to sync. So if I click on this thing, I can manage an account or I can log out. How about we just try to manage an account? Now, any of you folks that have messed with the Microsoft Identity Services would recognize this. This is the default you get when you start playing with Identity Services. And in fact, this bit up here will give you a bit of a clue of that we're working in at. So I'm going to log in as me with my standard unsecure secure password. Now, since I'm logged in, it knows who I am, and I can do various things. I can change all the stuff. Now, when I went to log in, I want to make a point here that I logged in with this email using the Microsoft Identity, and this is local to my machine. Using the Identity Services, it does not have to be local to my machine. You can use any OIDC compliant endpoint, whether that's Azure B2C or straight up Azure AD or Twitch, Twitter, Google, Facebook, GitHub, and any number of other OIDC compliant endpoints to make this identity check. Once you get that, you'll get back a token, and then you're going to use that token to mess around with stuff. Well, I say, yeah, you'll get back some sort of a token. There's various different kinds of tokens. In this case, we're going to be using bearer tokens to do things. So now if I go back to the server, I look at it, main page, and you'll see that down here at the very bottom, I'm now updated. And I can go do things. So what can we go do? Well, let's see if we can find a vehicle. So what this is a car checker. Imagine having a rental car lot and a person running around checking in cars. That's kind of the description here. And you can look around, you can move around. It's always the same car, by the way. Not quite that fancy, right? When I saw this first, I ooh and ahhed all over the place. But let's figure out how that authorization got plugged in there. Right here. If you will look, this is the car checker server controller and the vehicle thing that we're messing around with. We have this authorized. This is the standard .NET way. Don't be doing that. This is the standard .NET way of telling the .NET actions to make sure that everything is authorized as we come through. Basically, it's looking for a bearer token that it recognizes, or some sort of token that it recognizes. There's different ways of authorizing. I'm like, okay, well, how do I tell? Now this is the back end. The server has its own version of this, right? The client has its own version of this. How does the client tell the back end API, which is happens all the time? In case you're wondering, this is what the solution sort of looks like. Collapse it. Client server, and we got some shared stuff, right? The backend API knows that I need the right kind of token to do things, but how do I know which token I need to verify against what thing, right? And the front end is the one that has the token. How do I tell the back end to get to the front? How do I tell the front end to get to the back end, right? How do you do that? Well, we just do a pretty simple thing right here. After we match this authorize, then we go into the program.cs. Now this is in the client. Make sure I'm not lying to nobody. This is in the client. And I add this little bit of goodness here. We're going to add a message handler of this type, which is a standard type for authorization message handler. You don't have to write this, it's just there. You just need to add it in. And so it knows it will add a bearer token as things go back. All right, and that gets us to authentication. Gets that going. So the next thing is code sharing. So in the code sharing world, notice I'll just go to my next one. If you'll notice over here in the solution endpoints, I've got this thing called share. And one of my big bugaboos is you're making you a common. Hey, I need me a common namespace, put common things in there. Well, it turns out I've been in some applications where there's 50 projects and there's 75 commons. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't know where all that's supposed to go. So it gets confusing. So, but the idea behind this is that the client code and the server code, because of the way Blazor works, it doesn't really matter whether the client is actually running on the server and doing a Blazor server or Blazor WebAssembly, same code. And so that allows us a couple of things. And one of those things is that we can set up this shared access. Not only does this shared access or shared set of getting ahead of myself. I'm excited about this. Not only is this they share code, but they allows them to share objects as well. So you can say I've got a key. It's required. If it's required on the server, it's required on the client because they're both getting it from the same exact place. There's a range on the mileage, fuel tank levels, that sort of thing. And then you can do things like this. This not only is setting up the front end, the client, so that it knows the things it's supposed to know. Now I'm a little hesitant of putting client stuff in the front end, but that's a decision everybody else, people get to make. Not so happy with putting IDs in the front end of things, but sometimes you have to. And then at that point, we're setting up not only the contract between the front end and the back end, we're also, if you're using EF migrations or code first stuff, you're also setting up the schema of your database as you go forward, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah, all right. Next, I have notes of doom here. JavaScript interrupt. Okay. Raise your hand. How many people thought this was cool? I can't raise anything more than my one hand, or I can't mouse. I could raise my feet, but then I'd probably injure some portion of, never mind about all that. So I thought that was really cool. Guess what? That's not Blazor. That's actually the 3D.js stuff. That's JavaScript. So what? I thought, Harold, you said you didn't need JavaScript to make this stuff work. I said, no. I said, it's possible to not use JavaScript to make it work. However, why would you want to avoid JavaScript entirely, especially when you have things like this? And the ecosystem of JavaScript is huge. And why throw all that thing out and, or like, well, I'll just have to wait till somebody makes a Blazor version of that. Well, you might be waiting a very long time, especially when you can do JavaScript interrupt. That's a way for Blazor to talk to JavaScript and JavaScript to talk back to Blazor. There's a couple of things here that I need to show you that's pretty cool, right? If I hit F12 here and go into the application, we have something called an index DB. I don't know if you knew that was aware. I was not really aware that was actually there. In the index DB, I've got a vehicles database. I've got some locations, I got some metadata, and I got some server data. And if you look what's in the server data, there's lots of stuff, lots of cars. There's 1,000 entries. You're only seeing 50 of them here. But there's some JSON. We got a key, and we got some JSON that's holding on with a bunch of information there, right? And so that's how it's possible to make this disconnected and connected, semi-connected thing work, is through this index DB. Right now, how do we talk to that index DB? What do we do about that? Well, let me show you. The first thing, well, we'll talk about this second, actually. Okay. No, not you. Okay. This is a bit of, come on, did I just see that? Okay, we have a bit of JavaScript right here. We have a bit of JavaScript. And in this JavaScript, one of the things it does, it tells us how we're going to make, remember metadata, local edits, server data. It tells us how the index DB how to work. And we have local DB vehicle store, which is we get all, get first, put from, that sort of stuff. It's only 37 lines of code, so it can't be that hard, right? Actually, I've had 10 lines of code mess me up, but it's only 37 lines of code, and you won't have to touch it a whole bunch, but we go out and touch it occasionally. And it looks like pretty heady stuff, but you take it one bite at a time, and you can work yourself through it. Okay, KP. And so when we go to fetch these changes, guess what we do? We don't necessarily talk to the outside world. We talk through the JavaScript. JS invoke, the thing we're invoking, and the stuff we want back. And we get ready to it. We do a JS invoke again, stuff we get back, right? How do we make that possible? It's really hard. Using Microsoft JS interrupt. Now this doesn't look like. We include things, now we can do the JS interrupt and get access to all the JavaScript down there. Go back to this bit. So what is this? This is a component. We've seen these components before. We're in a Razor file inside. This is in markup. So we're saying what the environment's supposed to look back, because we're talking to the 3D.js stuff, what objects to display, what can be selected, we pass that in. Highlighted, which ones to highlight, we pass that in. And when something is clicked, what do we need to call in the Blazor? So if you go look down here in the bottom here, you will see selected part. So it calls that. And that's a JavaScript new wrapper for Blazor. It's a wrapper for Blazor that talks to the JavaScript for us and comes back to us to allow us to interrupt with that. You can write your own one of those things, and there's a few of them out there. I don't know any of them at the moment, but there's a few of them out there. At least I've been told that. Note on editing, and that's how that JavaScript interrupt works. Next thing on here is debugging. So if you'll see down here, I've got damage detection. Let's go to that. Come on. So look at where we are. Perform damage detection, and I've got a stop here, a stop there, and I also have a stop here, which is actually on the server. One of my biggest problems is when I'm debugging these web applications is sometimes I got to debug in JavaScript, sometimes I got to debug in C#, and as long as all that works, and some of that does work really well, as long as all that works, it's fine. But when usually the C#, not C#, but the JavaScript connection to the debugger sometimes goes awry, and I have a hard time dealing with that. So what does that look like to the real world as you're using it? So if I'm here, and let's say we're going to select something here, a hood. I'm going to add bonnet. And you can tell I'm in English, and it's England, right? Description, somebody at a dance party. All right. And then we're going to say, take a new picture, and I really don't have a good picture in here. Besides, we're just faking this damage detection anyway. The idea is this is a way that if you have lots of pictures of lots of cars using custom vision or machine learning on the edge or otherwise, it's a way to detect if there's really any damage there. So I can say detect damage, and when I click on that, you can see down here, I've got a breakpoint. I'm here. This is on the client. You can see I've got false. If I go forward once now, because I've actually set the thing, it's actually true. I can hit the F5, let it run through, and now you can see what we're doing here when we're detecting damage through our machine learning. We're just firing up a random number generator and generating some junk. If we were doing this for real, we would be packaging up the photo, sending up somewhere or into our custom vision, and then bringing back to get a confidence interval. In this case, it's a score back. And if we want to step through this, we can do that. Hit an F5 on it. Now we're stopped here. Damage detection. I'm able to debug all my stuff as I go, and then I can let this fly. And on the front of it, we get a confidence of that, and it's damaged. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Well, and that's all well and good. And we'll save that off. And we'll save it. And we got updates. Pretty cool, right? I think it's pretty cool. All right. The next thing is localization, which we've seen some of that already, but you didn't know you saw that. Right here. At localize. So what we've done is we've injected a localizer, string localizer. It knows how to go look up through the resource files, which look like I had that up there. Resource. For instance, this is a Spanish resource file that they've got loaded in here. If looks up back, that's the value it'll actually spit out when we're doing this. And the cool thing about this is as you add more languages is there, Blazor will download languages as they become selected to be done. If it doesn't know it, doesn't have a translation, it'll just spit you back the string there. Will blow up on you. So you're safe for doing all of that. So eventually you want to localize these things, right? Now the PWA thing, I think is progressive web apps. I think is fantastic. So you need a few things to do that, right? You'll need one of these. You need a manifest. No, you don't. No, none of you will not need a manifest. I'm ahead of myself again. All right. Oh, I remembered PWA. Once you set up the PWA, we already saw that with the JavaScript and how we're using a service to talk to everything. So for instance, if we did this, let's go do this, pick a thing we haven't picked before. I am going to, oh, no, I am wrong. I want to show you that I am indeed offline. So I go into network and I tell the network that I am offline, right? I'll do a page refresh. Ah, come on, you were there. Now it's getting me, it got me. All right. There's one other thing I didn't set up, but I can still demonstrate what I meant to demonstrate. 1 second here. I get in here and tell this thing I am offline. Right. Now I'm offline. And I want to add a note. Real is messed up. I go to save it. And I save it for real. Unsent edits, 1, could not sync. Pretty cool, huh? I thought it was cool. I'm going to clear out my trash here, and I'm going to tell it to say, retry again. And we'll have some details. And we're looking in the details. Look what I have in the details, in the response. No, headers. Payload, request payload. Where we're getting this from. Where did that go? Oh. Retry one more time. Refer, downgrade, got the headers, local host that we're talking to. So what I do now, remember we got details, they're busted, they're not working. If I take it from there and go to online, nothing happens. But if I do a retry, and if I'm really smart, I could try this retry when this thing gets updated. Now I've been updated, and if you look what's going on here, we got a status code 200, it gets it, right there. So let's try that one more time because I really want to show you this. Okay, now I'm going to take us offline. And I'm going to click on something, add a note, headlight. Save it. And really save it. That's not working the way I wanted. That's not working the way I really want it to work. All right, we're going on. Tell myself I'm back online again. Hit to retry. And now I'm updated again. I'm going. So I have a decent experience when I'm offline and going. So imagine I'm a car checker. I check it all, going in, and I'm not even near the network. And as I get back close to the network, it'll sense that and be able to update those things using the index DB. All right. Now back. Resume the session. All right, I know we're getting close to time. I do know it. Thought I'd resume the session. Something happened. Oh, there we go. So now you need to get your hands dirty. There's a Blazor Workshop that takes you through all those principles that I just showed you, including publishing. So that's the link at the very bottom there. Just do it. Just do it. Go do it. If you've been following me on Twitch, you'd have seen that happen over the last week and a half of me preparing for this. It takes you from that blank page on the left all the way to the right. It uses JavaScript in the you have the PWA and how to set that up. You've got components. You've also got some refactoring to preserve state. The login is there. In fact, not only do you log in there, there's a couple of things in there that shows you how to suggest that you use a different OIDC provider than the one that's currently built in. All right, next. Having some network difficulties here. Resume the session. Come on. All right. So much for that. Oh, it auto expires in 30 minutes. Ah, I was going too far. All right, so let's talk about the server side and client side. We have a server side, client side. One of them shipped in 3.0, the other one shipped in 3.1. It's ready to go. We've got some fun stuff here. Okay, I'm going to end this session and start a new one. You may have to rejoin this session. I apologize for that. It's my lack of knowledge on some of this. Okay, and that's what it is. The session timed out on me. All right, so you got a server side and a client side, and that's above and at the top portion. The bottom portion is with the Blazor hybrid. There's some uncommitted samples that are actually really, really cool. aka.ms Blazor Electron. That's Blazor running in Electron. What else runs in Electron? Visual Studio Code. So you get to use the same base shell that Visual Studio Code uses, but you get to use your Blazor stuff to make that happen. Web window is awesome. It's a unique thing that's a kind of a skunkworks thing, so I don't really have a demo for you to show right now. But it's basically imagine Blazor and an application running in your window. And then they got mobile Blazor bindings. I've got a few Xamarin friends that may have some comments on that, but those things do exist. What's next? Blazor is going to be in .NET 5, build and runtime. They're going to plan on doing some enhancements. A couple of things that you can't do right now is you can't do type constraints. For instance, I can't specify that I can only take an element attribute that's an int versus a string. Can't do that. And I can't also say that these element attributes are required for me to even for my component to activate. How do we do it with SVG and do some CSS isolation so that you can do some Angular type stuff on that. The WebAssembly specific stuff, because Microsoft does contribute to the WebAssembly open source project, multi-threaded runtime and lazy loading, which are the two biggest things that we've got going on there. All right, my ask. I know I've made, I've had some presentation guide food going on here, but these are my ask. Head over to blazor.net. If you have me in a session, you probably need to get the new session up at the ppt.ms kimjt at the link at the top of this page. Head over to blazor.net and give it a go. Get started. There's the Blazor Car Checker app. It's really a pretty cool app. Doesn't do a whole lot, but it does a few things. And the PWA, you can install it as an app. It's mobile bound. You can install this on your phone if you want to and see it work there. Do the workshop. It's going to take 6 to 8 hours probably to go through. The average for me 6-7 hours easy to go through on the thing. Maybe a little longer for others, maybe shorter for some. In fact, I had one person do this in about 2.5 to 3 hours. I'm like, man, you're amazing. Send me some feedback. Follow me on Twitch. Those are my asks. And I'm going to leave the session up as much as I can. There's a ton of links. Going on there. And as far as the fun stuff, and so I can get ready to take questions, I'm going to show you a couple of things here. One of the things is asteroids. This is all C# and Blazor running. And yes, it's just like you would. Okay, fine, right? And then we have that has happened before. And the other one is Pac-Man. And yes, this is all C# and WebAssembly with Blazor on top of it. I'm a big 80s fan. So that's about all I have. So if there's any questions, if there's any comments, please fire them at me. I'm willing to take them on and answer any that I can. Answer them all.
Great. Thanks a lot, Harold. That was really interesting. Before we go, I do want to remind everyone that this talk will be posted at HoustonTechFest.com, so you can go review it afterwards if you want to dive deeper into the links and see those things. I don't see a lot of questions here in the Q&A, so go ahead and feel free to post them here, and Harold will be happy to answer them for you.
Yeah, I'm going to post those links back up, by the way, that I had at the very end, in case you guys want to read them and go.
And Harold, my question, somebody who spent a lot of time doing Angular development was, what are you seeing as far as the rise in popularity of Blazor, especially against those frameworks? You still getting the word out about them?
I think we're still getting the word out. I think you know, I'm a Microsoft MVP, so I'm going to be tilted toward the Microsoft issues of things. You know, Microsoft way of things, right? But in fact, my current client has me doing Angular, and I like Angular. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's going to take a while to get things out there. I think Blazor itself has some growing to do. For instance, if you want to link into a page using a, you know, you're doing the number sign links, so you're linking from one section to a page to the other. Page. Last time I checked, they didn't have a good answer for that, but that doesn't mean they won't have an answer for it in the future.
Yep. And do you see? I mean, this could have some major appeal for long-time back-end developers, I would think.
I would think so. Yeah, I would think so too, because I mean, in full transparency, when I saw this back in November, and I knew I had my contract coming up on a different client was coming to an end, I'm like, well, I need to learn some new stuff, and I started looking at React. I started looking at Angular, and I'm like, man, people have been doing this 4 or 5 years. I don't know how I can even imagine that I could keep up with those folks, right? And I'm certainly going to try, but this Blazor thing started at the very, it's just generally released here a couple of months ago. And I thought, well, I can certainly jump on the middle of that and see what's happening, see where that goes. And if I've got to use React or Angular, I can certainly do that. But I might as well jump on the deep end of this pool and get going on it, because I think there might be some future there. The common question I get is like, well, isn't this just like Silverlight? And you know, that cuts me deep, man. That cuts me real deep. I'm just saying, because I was all in for Silverlight. I truly was, and they just kind of ran out of steam on the thing because it was Microsoft pushing it. The big difference now versus in the Silverlight days is that Microsoft isn't in this by itself. There's a whole WebAssembly consortium that's built from, you know, the Chrome folks, the Firefox, Google folks are all behind this. Almost everybody in the industry has this, and it's already baked into your web browser now, as opposed to Silverlight, which was an add-on thing you had to go download. Right.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was kind of curious about that when you mentioned that early on. I was wondering, well, how can this WebAssembly run in the browser already? And it sounds like the browser manufacturers have already introduced that compliance with that spec into their products.
Yes. And I mean, and other people saying like, well, isn't this just active pages all over again from the 2000s? Yes and no. Again, it's not just Microsoft doing this. It's a whole consortium of folks doing this thing, and they're doing it in with an eye on security and also flexibility. Because I mean, Blazor's the product from Microsoft, but Ruby has a product. Rust, I don't know if Rust does, but Ruby does for sure. And I think Java has a way to do that, and a few other people have a way to do that that are running on top of WebAssembly as well. So they can. This is just one way of going about it. WebAssembly is everywhere, whether you know it or not, right? And other people have ways of going about it. This is just Microsoft ways of going about it.
Very cool. Well, I don't see any Q&A questions, Harold. So I thank you very much for the talk. It was really interesting. And thank you all to all the attendees for joining us for Houston Tech Fest. We appreciate it, and hope to see you soon in person. Thanks and goodbye.
Take care, folks.